Louie Tee. Welcome to the 2019 NFL Draft Wrap-Up Series where your man Louie Tee aims to break down all 32 teams in the National Football League's 2019 NFL Draft using our baseball grading scale, single, double, triple, home run. There are no strikeouts here in the Draft Wrap-Up Series as we cannot tell how these players are going to pan out, and I don't want to discount any of these young men before they get their chance in the National Football League. And so we'll get a score for each and every single player selected in said team's draft. We'll apply bonuses when necessary, get an aggregate score, divide by the number of picks, which will yield us an overall grade for that team's draft. We'll then move on to the next team in the series picked by you. That's right, you, the viewer, are in total control as this is the You Pick format. Simply be the first to leave a comment in the comment section of this and future videos in this series stating two things: the phrase next and the team you'd like to see next. Some examples would be Titans next, Tennessee. You get where I'm going with this, okay? Tennessee Titans next. You don't want to be too wordy because you want to get your team up next in the comment section first. So with that being said, the next team up in the series is none other than the Tennessee Titans. And this was a really good draft by GM John Robinson and company, man. And these are the types of drafts that you build upon and end up building a foundation for years to come that help your team get over the top. And we kind of feel like the Titans are one of those teams, and there's a bunch of them in the league. They're one of about 15 to 20 teams that are kind of stuck in neutral, in the middle of the pack, so to speak, in the NFL pantheon of teams. You've got your elites, you've got your bottom feeders, and then you've got a conglomerate of about 15 to 20 teams that are just stuck in the middle. They could go anywhere from 7-9 to 10-6 if they have a really good season and they get all the bounces of the football and they stay relatively healthy. They could go 10-6, 11-5 if they're lucky. But generally speaking, they're going to be somewhere in that 7-9, 9-7 range. Somewhere in there most likely is where their season is going to probably fall. And they're not uncommon in this league. And what I think can take this Titans team over the top is two things. One, obviously, they need more production out of their offense. More specifically, they need more production out of the quarterback position. And look, I don't like to really blame a lot of the ills of the offense on Marcus Mariota. He's had 4 coordinators, now going on his 5th, in as many seasons. It's tough when you're learning a new system every single year. There isn't that comfortable feel of knowing I'm going into the same exact system I was in last year. I don't have to learn any new terminology, new concepts, or any of that. I don't have to adjust to a guy's way of calling a game. I'm comfortable because I know what to expect. I was in this same system last year. Hasn't really been able to do that. We've seen quarterbacks be destroyed because they haven't had the continuity of being in the same system from year to year. So I kind of pull back the reins when I want to really criticize Marcus Mariota because he's been through a lot. They haven't had the most talent around him either. And so there's a number of different ways you could take that argument and discussion. But at the end of the day, Marcus Mariota has to produce better. You can't continue to make excuses for him getting injured and the lack of production on the football field. 11 touchdowns, 8 interceptions isn't good enough in this league if you're going to try to win football games consistently. And that takes me to my next point of how this team can get out of that rut of being one of these teams that's just average in the league. And that's take this defensive group to the next level. Look, this Titans defense, they're good every year. And some years they're above average. But if you want to be elite, they need to get pressure off the edge. That's the one thing that's stopping the Titans. I really like their secondary. I think they got some backers that can run and be impactful. Up front is where they struggle because they don't get enough pressure on the quarterback. I've been yelling this for years. Back in the Derek Morgan days, I said there's not enough pressure off the edge in Tennessee. You go out and get Brian Orakpo. He's cool, but I can tell you firsthand as a Redskins fan, Brian Orakpo was only going to do but so much, and he wasn't going to come up in critical situations for you and bag the quarterback. He's since moved on and retired. Bottom line is you need to upgrade the edge rusher position. You did it last year, and a guy that I have confidence that he will evolve into a big-time pass rusher in this league in Harold Landry, and now he needs some company. You go out, you get Cameron Wake in the offseason, and that's cool, but Cameron Wake's like 39 years old. He's 35, I believe, 34, 35, somewhere in that neighborhood, 36, somewhere in there. He's like 87 years old, though. I mean, how much do you really expect to get out of Cameron Wake in this his 10th, 11th, 12th year in the league? He's been doing this for quite some time. And remember, he had some Canadian football experience before he got here. So there's a lot of mileage on Cameron Wake coming into the 2019 NFL season. I don't know what the Titans expect out of him. We'll see what he still has left. But bottom line, there needed to be an upgrading of that position. I think they did that. And it wouldn't hurt to actually get more production from someone other than your defensive tackle that seems to be the only guy to give you anything along your defensive line. His name just escaped me, but it'll come to me eventually. But you know exactly who I'm talking about. It'd be nice to get some production out of someone other than him. And so this draft to me met a series of needs for the Tennessee Titans. There was one need that I thought you could have addressed in this draft, but you simply ran out of picks. And I don't have a problem with that because all of the players that you got fit a need and to me are going to end up being productive football players for this Titans team moving forward. I don't have a problem with the compact 6-player draft if you're going to be able to get players that come in and impact your team immediately. And I think all 6 of these players are going to not only make this football team, but I think they're going to have an impact immediately on this Titans roster. Let's jump into the 2019 NFL Draft of the Tennessee Titans as we start in the first round, 19th overall selection, defensive lineman out of Mississippi State. Jeffrey Simmons is the selection. So, as I mentioned, Jeffrey Simmons is the pick here, and there was a lot of controversy surrounding Jeffrey Simmons coming into the draft, coming into the combine. And this was all pre-ACL tear. He obviously tore his ACL working out in Florida because he wasn't going to be at the combine. And again, I've talked about this on my podcast, Louie Tee Network podcast. Check that out if you haven't already done so. What are you waiting on? Louie Tee Network podcast available on all the major platforms. It's available on Google Music Play. It's available on Stitcher. It's available on Apple Podcasts. Also on Spotify and TuneIn. And of course, the website, LouieTNetwork.net. Check out the Louie Tee Network podcast. A lot of great content there. But I talked about him not being invited to the combine and how he had a transgression. We all know about it. There's video, and ESPN, shame on them for really demeaning this guy during the draft. It's like they were sitting on fastball. They got the pick in the first round, and they couldn't wait to unveil all that they had on this guy. I thought it was a really shameful display of just simply not allowing a guy to bask in the moment. We all know about the situation. He's been very contrite, and he's done all the right things since the incident. They railroaded him, but that's nor here nor there. I already talked about that on my podcast as well. Talked about that during draft night. It was egregious, but that's nor here nor there. Here's a guy that I absolutely love. Think he's going to be a stud at the next level. If not for the ACL injury pre-draft, you're talking about potentially a top 10 talent. A guy that would have probably gone off the board in the first 10 picks. In a heavy defensive draft in the first round in 2019, you easily could have seen this guy go off the board in the top 10 picks. And the talent here alone speaks volumes because we've seen guys get injured pre-draft before and fall out of the first round. All right, it's more uncommon for you to get injured this close to the draft and still be a first-round pick than it is you get injured this close and still become a first-round pick. All right, we've seen guys like Jalen Smith tear up his knee, become a second-round pick. We've seen guys like Miles Jack, with all the injuries, fall out of the first round. These are talented football players that would have been top 5, top 10 picks if not for injuries. They didn't make it in the first round. All right, we saw the cornerback out of Washington drafted by the Eagles fall out of the first round. We've seen it before, but this is a rare instance here because of the talent. The talent is undeniable here with Jeffrey Simmons. And so I'm already broken him down, so I'm not going to do that here. If you're looking for a thorough breakdown, film, and all of that good stuff of Jeffrey Simmons, check out my Draft Prospects 101 series on the Louie Tee Network, and subscribe if you haven't already done so to the Louie Tee Network for more great content. But that's what I did there. I broke him down, talked about his pros, cons, and the things that I like with Jeffrey Simmons and some of the things he needs to improve upon. But all in all, this is a guy that can come in and change the game for you. Um, you don't have enough production on your defensive line, as I've mentioned before. It's not for a lack of trying. You've tried the Austin Johnsons of the world, and some of the other guys you've drafted that haven't really panned out. Um, it is what it is. It's a hit or miss league in this draft. We know this to be a fact, and you just haven't had the kind of success you have hoped for um, moving forward in the draft at the defensive line position. You're hoping that stops here. You're hoping to get some help up front here with this selection, and I think you have. In the first round, 19th overall pick, defensive lineman out of Mississippi State, Jeffrey Simmons for me is.
Hits one high! Hits it deep! It is out of here!
And for those of you who haven't had a chance to check out the video on Jeffrey Simmons, I comped him to Gerald McCoy. He looks like Gerald McCoy. He plays like Gerald McCoy. I think he might be even a little bit more athletically gifted than McCoy was coming into the league. But this guy has immense potential. And I've talked about ACL injuries and how they're the new Tommy John surgery of the NFL in terms of the success rate and how fast players come back from it. Tommy John surgery is a little bit different in the sense that, you know, if a guy has Tommy John surgery, you're not going to see him the entire next season. When it doesn't matter when he gets it, you're just going to miss. He's going to be out for an entire calendar year. More so with an ACL now, with the advents of surgery and modern science, these things happen so quickly now, and these athletes are so much more conditioned and trained to be able to come back from these types of injuries so much quicker that it wouldn't shock me if Jeffrey Simmons was able to help you this year. I wouldn't bank on it, but if you go with the 9-month theory, which is generally the time frame that is given for an ACL tear, then you're talking about November. Again, that's pupless. He could easily come back and help you. At that point, though, of your season, where are you, and do you need him to come in and help, or do you want to put him out on the football field because you have a fifth-year option? You don't have to rush this guy. He is the future of your defensive line, so it'd be wise to make sure you go about this the right way. But most likely, he'll be ready to help in November. So I love this pick. I know a lot of people had things to say about it, but they did their homework, did the Titans. Obviously, if you're going to select a guy like this in the first round, knowing he can't help you right away, you had to do some homework, and I think they found that they love the player and off the field as well as the guy they're getting on the field as well. Now you go to the second round, 51st pick overall, a wide receiver out of Ole Miss, Arthur James Brown. You know him as A.J. Brown is the selection. So this pick here was interesting because I didn't expect him to be here for you at 51. All right. I was actually shocked how the wide receiver position broke down because I thought there was going to be a major run on receivers towards the top of the second. And by the time you got to the midpoint of the second, late second, there would just be table scraps left of the really so-called elite receivers in this draft. Again, this wasn't a top-heavy draft. This was a deep draft at receiver. You weren't going to find guys that you were clamoring over in the first round in the top 5 and things of that nature. But there was a bunch of guys that I thought were great value from picks, let's call it 20 to 50. And I thought in that range of 30 picks, you were going to see 7 or 8 receivers come off the board. I was wrong. You saw 2 go in the first round, which is about what I thought would come off the board, 2 or 3 in the first round. And I thought Marquise Hollywood Brown was the first receiver in this draft, was the best receiver. I thought N'Keal Harry was the second best receiver, and I thought A.J. Brown was the third best receiver. Well, that's the order in which they came off the board, 1, 2, 3 in this draft. And I just didn't expect the third receiver coming off the board to come all the way at 51. So that was a shock. The run that came in the second round was at cornerback. That's when we started to see the corners come off the board, and I thought that replaced the receiver position, and you benefited from that. All the corners that started to come off the board, and a couple of reaches at linebacker and things of that nature. That allowed a guy like A.J. Brown to drop into your lap, and it couldn't have played out any better for you. You didn't have to trade up. You didn't have to do anything preposterous to get a guy that you probably targeted all along. And so it's no secret that the Titans needed help on the outside. They've got a bunch of receivers, but none of them really impact the game other than the receiver you took in the first round. What is it, 2 years ago now? Three? I think we're the third year now we're going into. So he started to come into his own last year. Thought he did some really good things. He looks like he's going to be a big-time receiver. And I thought we needed to see that from Corey Davis, and we saw it from him. So he needs a running mate, though. There's not enough stuff at receiver. You did get Adam Humphries in free agency. He's a slot guy, though. You needed another wide receiver. And it's funny because A.J. Brown played the slot a ton at Ole Miss. And I think the flexibility that he presents, the ability to play inside, outside, was appealing to the Titans, among other things. Obviously, he's a big physical freak. I'm not going to break him down. I've already done that on the Draft Prospects 101 series. He was another guy I was able to get to prior to the draft, so I'm not going to do that here. But there's a lot of things to like. I'm going to go over these needs real quick because, as you see in front of you, there are a list of needs that I deemed. This is what I thought the Titans needed coming into the draft, and it's in the order of importance. So edge rusher was first. As you can see, defensive line was second on my list of needs. They took care of that. Then offensive line is something else they need to address. You moved on from Josh Klein, and there's some other guys that are no longer on the roster, and so you need to upgrade the offensive line. And it really doesn't matter if you're talking tackle because you didn't pick up the fifth-year option on your right tackle. So you needed to do something at offensive line, guard in particular. Right now there is an opening along your offensive line. Wide receiver, I just talked about the need to get another guy opposite of Corey Davis. Obviously, like I said, you went out and got Adam Humphries in free agency. He's going to help a ton, but you still needed more stuff at wide receiver. You needed a number 2 is what you needed. Humphrey is a number 3. Davis is a number 1. You need a true number 2 on your team, and I think you may have gotten that in A.J. Brown. Let's take wide receiver off your list of needs as you take care of that here in the second round. I also think that you need a tight end. And that would have been great to get. You didn't draft a tight end. We'll talk about that a little bit later on, though. But, I know you like Jonnu Smith. I like Jonnu Smith as well. And Delaney Walker is, 35, 34, 35, somewhere in that neighborhood, coming off of an ACL or an ankle injury. It was a nasty, gruesome ankle injury. So he's getting up there in age. I just thought this, in such a deep tight end group, this was the year to grab a tight end. And you didn't have to do it early to still get good production and a guy that could help you. You just simply ran out of picks, though. Safety is another position that I thought you needed to address. Obviously, moving on from Jonathan Cyprien in the offseason, thought you just needed to address safety. You like Kenny Vaccaro. You added him last year. You like what you got out of him, and so you re-upped on him. You've got some stuff at safety, but it doesn't hurt to add more stuff at safety, and you did that in this draft as well. We'll get to that later. But in the second round, 51st pick overall, I think it's an absolute steal what you got. You got the third best receiver in the draft at 51. Think about that. Let it resonate. And then while you're doing that, while you're chewing on that, also chew on this grade that you get in the second round, 51st pick overall. Wide receiver out of Ole Miss, A.J. Brown for me is.
Hits it high! Hits it deep! It is out of here!
And I talked about him on the Draft Prospects 101 series, and I comped him to Michael Crabtree. Remember how good Crabtree was coming out of Texas Tech. And remember, Crabtree was a guy that could play in the slot. He could also play out wide. He was a bigger body receiver. These are all things that A.J. Brown brings to the table. And so I see a lot of crabs in A.J. Brown. And remember, I'm talking 49ers, A.J. Brown, Michael Crabtree, not Oakland Raiders, not Baltimore Raven, Michael Crabtree. Think of Michael Crabtree in his prime. That's what you're getting here in A.J. Brown. And so you move on to the third round, 82nd pick overall. UNC Charlotte offensive lineman Nate Davis is the selection. So Nate Davis is interesting here. This is a guy that I think they look at as someone that is a plug and play type of guard that they're going to bring in. He played tackle at Charlotte. He's not going to play tackle at the NFL level. He just doesn't have the size to do so. He's an immediate candidate to kick inside, and he played guard as well. And for his final year at UNC Charlotte, they moved him outside the tackle, and he held it down for him. But at the NFL level, he is a guard through and through. And this is what I think of Nate Davis. So 6'3", 316, 33-inch arms. A lot of people have an issue with his arms. I don't. I mean, he's a guard. I've seen guys with lesser arms get it done. So a lot of people make a lot of his arm length. I'm good. I think he's fine. So squatty, powerful offensive lineman that consistently shows above average movement skills and the ability to generate movement in the run game. While his frame isn't ideal to play tackle, which is what he played in 2018, a move back inside the guard where he played from 2015 to 2017 would benefit Davis and is almost a necessity for his survival in the NFL. While he possesses all the tools to be a solid starting guard in the NFL, he does have flaws. He ducks his head at times, causing him to misfire. He lunges from time to time and is on the ground more often than he should be. These things, they frustrate me, especially the on the ground more often than he needs to be thing. That's one of my pet peeves with offensive linemen. Why are you on the ground? If you're not cut blocking a guy, if you're not pancaking somebody, you don't need to be on the ground. Why are you on the ground? So generally speaking, he's on the ground quite a bit. You know, if you're not in a short yardage situation, low man wins where you need to get down and get dirty, I don't want to see you on the ground. There are only a handful of situations where you need to be on the ground, and there are times where he just has no business being on the ground, and he's on the ground. And so that's something he needs to clean up, and some of that does have to do with him lunging. All right, you lunge, you are off balance. It's easy to be knocked on your ass. There are times where he's, like I said, ducking his head upon contact, not seeing what he's hitting, and he's missing, he's misfiring. That a lot of times happens at the second level. There's a lot to like, though, with this guy. The thing that I like the most is how physical he is in the run game. I've watched him move people in the run game. The Titans talked about wanting to be more physical with their run game, and you got a new offensive coordinator. You moved your tight ends coach in the position of offensive coordinator, so you've promoted him from within. So he's going to keep a lot of the same terminology, which is great for Marcus Mariota in this Titans offense. But he says he's going to implement some new concepts and try to maximize the potential of a Marcus Mariota. And one of the ways to do that is to run the football effectively. You were 7th in rushing last year. It's what you probably do best offensively. And when you're at your best, the run game is just humming, and you're able to go play action fake off of that. And a guy like Nate Davis is going to help you run the football more effectively and efficiently. And so I think this is a guy that you look to as a plug-and-play guard, and it wouldn't shock me if he started day one for you along the offensive line. But we'll see what he brings to the table. It wouldn't shock me if he didn't start, okay? We'll see what he is able to provide for you. I've got my doubts. I've got my concerns. I've also got a lot of confidence that this guy can start at the NFL level. I just don't know if he's ready to start right away or not. We're going to see. I'm interested to see how it goes with Nate Davis. I think he's going to ultimately start for the Titans in 2019. I just don't know if it's going to be week 1 or not. Either way, in the third round, 82nd pick overall, offensive lineman out of UNC Charlotte, Nate Davis for me is. And let's take the offensive line off of the board as you've addressed that need here as well. My comp for him is A.J. Cann, the offensive lineman out of South Carolina that was drafted by the Jacksonville Jaguars some 4 years ago or so. AJ Cann is a guy that I thought very highly of coming out of South Carolina. I feel the same way about Nate Davis. Feel like he has a chance to start. AJ Cann has started in Jacksonville for the Jaguars, and I think Nate Davis can do the same for the Titans in Tennessee. You go to their next pick, fourth round, 116th overall selection, defensive back out of Iowa, Amani Hooker is the selection. So this is a pick that I absolutely love it for the Tennessee Titans. This is one of those guys that, to me, and there's certain positions where you're starting to see a little bit of a changing of the guard, so to speak. You know, once upon a time, you wanted bigger, stronger, more physical safeties to impose their will. Now the NFL, you can't hit guys over the middle of the field. You can't intimidate. You don't really need the big 235-pound safety anymore. Those guys aren't in vogue anymore. It's not cool to have guys that are that big at the safety position unless they're a freakish athlete. Then that kind of transcends that. But rarely do you find the 225-pound safety that can run. Like, they don't make them like Sean Taylor anymore, generally speaking. So those guys are moved to linebacker now. Those 225, 230-pound safeties that used to play in the league, those are now linebackers. Now you get the 210, 205-pound safety that looks like a corner. And that's what you're getting here in Amani Hooker, a guy that has the mentality of a safety, but has the ability and the skill set of a nickel. And so it's the best of both worlds. It's what you're looking for at the safety position in the NFL today, because you want a guy that can rock and roll, play both free and strong, a guy that can come down in the box and be a tackler, but also be able to take care of some responsibilities in zone coverages underneath as well as deep. You know, even if he can't play single high safety by himself, if he can take away a half of the field, you'll take that. If he's got the range to be able to play the middle of the field all the way to the other sideline, you'll take that. You know, in today's NFL, you'll take the guy that can drop over the slot and run with the tight end, run with the receiver in the slot, and be able to get that job done as well. And all of those things I feel like you get here in Amani Hooker. Let's take care of the safety position as you get rid of that need here in the fourth round with Amani Hooker. Let me give you my quick synopsis of what he brings to the table. 5'11", 210 pounds, 4'4", 840, 37-inch vert, and a 10'2" broad for Amani Hooker. So again, you're getting elite athleticism here in a safety prospect in Hooker. An ultra-talented and versatile player, so much so that Iowa coaches on the defensive side of the football created a hybrid nickel backer position to get him on the field full-time in 2018. You're talking about a junior that came out after the 2018 season. So a guy that still has a lot of growth and learning to do, but so much upside that you couldn't pass up on him here in the fourth round. And it paid off as Hooker ascended to Big Ten Defensive Back of the Year. He's a sneaky good athlete, willing to tackle and be physical, but his best attribute is his anticipation and instincts, which helped him pick off 4 passes in 2018 and allows him to cover for his lack of size and any other limitations. Although he's prone to taking some poor pursuit angles, Hooker is often around the ball, can cover in the slot, and even offers special teams value in the form of a punt returner in a pinch. And I've even read that the Titans are going to explore that option with him to see if he offers them some punt return ability. I don't know if they're necessarily in love with the idea of Adoree Jackson continuing to be on punt returns. He hasn't broken one yet. I thought he would have done it by now. At some point, I was really expecting him, and he's had, I think, 1 or 2 maybe called back due to penalty. But at some point, you got to value what Adoree Jackson brings to the table at cornerback, and you just don't want to put him out on punt returns. So if you can get a guy that you think can be explosive and dynamic back there and take him off of punt returns, why not kill 2 birds with 1 stone? All right, and so I think they're going to look at that option and see if he brings anything to the table from that standpoint. But in any event, this is a guy that I think brings a lot of good traits good malleable traits too, things that you can shape and form into whatever you want to fit into your defensive scheme. He brings to the table a lot of things that are in today's NFL at that hybrid position, that safety that's underneath, that's close to the line of scrimmage, that's playing the hook zone, that's being a robber or a lurker, that's keying eyes of the quarterback, which Amani Hooker does extremely well. There's a pick against Maryland where you're just amazed at his ability to read the quarterback's eyes and run the route for the tight end, cuts underneath the route, picks it off. It's a gorgeous play. It's what really, to me, defines who Amani Hooker is. That's what he brings to the table, the ability to have instincts and see what's happening before it happens and make a play. And boy, I hate some of the angles he takes. He takes some horrible angles that'll get you beat 9 times out of 10 at the next level. All right. However, he's around the ball so often. He makes so many plays. He's so dynamic as a football player. He's so smart and instinctual that it does mask some of the deficiencies that he does have. And so I love this pick in the fourth round, 116th pick overall. Defensive back out of Iowa, Amani Hooker, for me, is and I comp him to a guy that you already have on your roster in Kenny Vaccaro, one of these safeties that can play over the slot, that can play close to the line of scrimmage, that can be a force there, can drop underneath in some underneath zones and be productive there as well. You can blitz him. There are a lot of things you can do with Amani Hooker. He reminds me a lot of Kenny Vaccaro coming out of Texas and what the Saints and now what he's been doing in Tennessee with this Titans football team. And it's not shocking that you draft a guy that looks like a guy that you already have on the roster. That's what teams generally do. And I think you just did that here with the drafting of Amani Hooker. So we go to the 5th round, 168th overall selection. Edge rusher out of Georgia, DeAndre Walker is the pick. So here's a guy in DeAndre Walker that I think much like A.J. Brown in the 2nd round, you didn't expect him to be here for you in the 5th round. And honestly, he probably shouldn't have been here for you to select in the 5th round. And you traded up to get Amani Hooker because that was value that you just deemed to be too good to be true in the 4th round. You traded up to get Walker here in the 5th round because, again, you deemed this value too good to be true and you needed to get him. And you probably had a 4th or 3rd round grade on Walker, and he was sitting here in the 5th. You're like, let's get him before someone else does. We've gotten too close to him now to allow someone else to swoop in and get him. Let's go and get our guy. And you do the same thing in the 6th round with the pick that I think is a hell of a pickup in the 6th round. And we'll get there and talk about that in a second. But let's talk about DeAndre Walker here in the 5th round because I talked about edge rusher being a need. You waited a while to address it, but nonetheless, you addressed it. And so let's take that off the board. And I think the selection in the 1st round of Jeffrey Simmons is going to help your pass rush. A lot of people look at Jeffrey Simmons as a guy that can stop the run and be a force up front against the run. I look at Simmons as an all-around defensive stud. Stop the run, but also get pressure on the quarterback. And I've always been a guy that feels like you don't draft a defensive lineman in the top 15 picks unless he can do both. Rush the quarterback and stop the run. I think that's why you feel really good about waiting until the 5th round. There were other talented players at other positions of need. And then you end up lucking into a guy like DeAndre Walker. Now, is he elite? I don't think he's elite. I don't. But could he grow into a very productive NFL pass rusher? You damn right he can. Let's talk about what he brings to the table. 6'2", 251 pounds. The thing that I'd like to see him utilize more that he doesn't utilize enough at this point, 34-inch arms. His arms are ridiculously long, and he's a guy that's built with a strong base. His lower half is really thick. He's a thickly built guy with long arms. So there is something here to DeAndre Walker. He's got to learn how to use his body to his advantage. So a thickly built yet relatively flexible edge rusher with tremendous tremendously long arms and an initial burst off the ball. Walker is a bit of a liability in the run game and doesn't seem to have much of a plan as an edge rusher, but his length, burst, and bend give him a chance to win on any given snap. He stunts well into the inside and has the innate ability to turn sideways and slither into the backfield. While he's far from elite, he's just the type of player that could evolve into a dynamic edge rusher at the next level. So I said a lot there. So let me kind of dig in and dive into what I just explained to you. So here's the first thing that jumps out at me. This guy has tremendously long arms, as I mentioned, but he's got this flexibility that is rare in today's NFL. Like, it used to be nothing to see a guy bend the edge like a Von Miller or a DeMarcus Ware. You don't see guys be able to bend the corner very often anymore. Guys just aren't as flexible as they once were. They're such tightly wound athletes. They're so explosive and dynamic that they don't have the flexibility to bend the edge and be able to duck around a 6'5", 6'6" tackle. The tackles don't want to bend, all right? They don't want to have to go down and get a guy. That's why it's so much easier to turn a corner when you can bend. DeAndre Walker actually has the innate ability to bend and kind of contort his body, turn and slither through small creases and gaps, and bend his body at an angle that will allow him to turn the corner versus some tackles. Again, he needs to tap into that more often. I watched him in a game against Missouri, and if you're looking for the quintessential game of DeAndre Walker, if you want to know what you're getting in Walker, that's the game to turn on. He was dominant in that game. He was everywhere. He forced 2 fumbles. He had a pass breakup and a great play against the tight end over the middle of the football field. You saw everything that this guy could be at the next level, and I think he needs to use more of that. I saw some push-pull in that game. All right, I call it latch and snatch, where you grab a tackle, you shake him up a little bit, then you pull him. All right, and it thrusts you towards the quarterback. He's got the long arms to be able to use the latch and snatch technique to perfection. He doesn't do it enough. I think there are some things that he can utilize at the next level to make him a dynamic edge rusher. And he's got this crazy get off. His first 3 or 4 steps eat up so much ground. I talked about that thick lower half that he has. It's explosive, but again, he doesn't use it enough. He doesn't use it to his advantage. He may win initially off the snap, and then he bogs down, and that tackle's able to lay hands on him. That's where that length comes into play. Knock those hands down, finish around the edge, turn the corner and bend. That's where that bend comes in, and get flat and come down that line to the quarterback. He's got some tools, man, but he didn't use them all the time. He's a guy that didn't get a lot of reps at Georgia because he was behind Davin Bellamy and behind Lorenzo Carter, who went off the board in the 3rd round. Is he as physically gifted as Lorenzo Carter was coming out of Georgia last year that was drafted in the 3rd round by the Giants? No, he's not. But I think he could be just as good, if not better, an edge rusher at the next level because of the things he has in his tool belt. He's just got to use them. That's all. And so I look at DeAndre Walker. I get excited about guys like this because the upside is enormous. But upside without actual realization of that potential gets you nothing. And so right now, this guy has triple talent, home run potential, but he's a double right now because I got to see it come to fruition. All right. Now, he got to start in 2018, his only year of starting at Georgia. 7.5 sacks is not bad for your first year of starting. So there's potential here. Can the Titans get all of it out of him? You got to squeeze this rag dry and get every single drop out of it. And in the 5th round, this is tremendous value for a guy that could have easily gone in the 3rd or 4th round. So I like this pick here in the 5th round. I like it a lot. But there's some development to do. His comp is D Ford. He can become D Ford. Remember, year 1, year 2, D Ford, non-existent in Kansas City. He was kind of getting his footing. He was dealing with injuries. He wasn't the guy. He was still kind of behind Tamba Hali and Justin Houston. They got injured in his 3rd season. Both of those guys are out, and he had to become the guy in Kansas City, and he did. He came to life in his 3rd year. You saw it coming. By the 4th year, he was a dominant edge rusher for them, double-digit sacks in that 4th season, parlayed that into a big deal that he ended up getting in San Francisco. I see a lot of the same qualities for DeAndre Walker. Now, the thing is, you're hoping that Harold Landry develops into the guy and that he's a secondary rusher for you. You honestly could care less. You just need one of those guys to pop. It'd be nice if both of those guys pop for you because, again, in this league, what's better than one? Two. And everyone's looking for a tag team off the edge. You have a chance to potentially have that now if both of those guys pan out here in the 5th round, 168th overall selection. Edge rusher out of Georgia, DeAndre Walker for me is And so we wrap this Titans draft up in the 6th round, 188th overall selection. Linebacker out of West Virginia, David Long is the selection. All right, so let me be brutally honest with you here. And I think this might be my favorite pick in this draft. Now, obviously, he isn't the most talented player you got in this draft. I think the first 2 players that you selected, they're both home runs and for a good reason. But I liken this to a situation at the combine where you see a receiver or a DB run a 4.29, and you're like, wow, that's really fast. And you would hear Mike Mayock say, look, that's impressive. And, I expect those guys to run. I'm more impressed with the 313-pound defensive tackle or offensive lineman that's running a 4.78. That's more impressive than the wide receiver, corner, running back, DB that runs a 4.29. I liken that to this pick here in the 6th round. Like, it's more impressive to get a guy that I'm excited about enough to the point where he exceeds a double than a guy in the 1st or 2nd round that gets a home run, because those guys should be hitting home runs. They should be hitting triples. They're those types of players. That's why they went early in the draft. This is a guy that I think snuck between the cracks. And yeah, he's got some things that you have to take into consideration. There's a reason why he's here in the 6th round, but I think some people missed on this guy. That's why he's here in the 6th round, to be honest with you. Just know this. I think this guy's not only going to have an impact in his rookie. First of all, he's going to make the roster. Let's start there, because 6th round picks aren't guaranteed to make your football team. Not only is David Long going to, I'm telling you this, I'm not guessing, this isn't conjecture. I'm telling you, he's going to make your football team. That's number 1. Number 2, he's going to have an impact. And number 3, at some point, maybe not year 1. All right, that's maybe a little bit of a stretch. Maybe injuries open the door for him. He's going to start for you at some point in his career. I'm thinking sooner rather than later. It wouldn't shock me if he was a starter by year 2. I think he does some good things at the tail end of his rookie season, so much so that you're like, hey, we got to get this guy on the field. He's going to have an impact this year in some shape, way, or form. He's going to have a package set aside that he gets on the field. He's that dynamic of a football player. You got a steal here in the 6th round. Shh, don't tell nobody, though. All right, so let's talk about David Long, man. I was impressed. 5'11", 227. There are some things that I think dropped him down. Don't talk to me about size anymore, all right? 5'11", 220. Don't talk to me about 5'11", 227 and use that as a knock. Okay, Devin Bush went 10th overall to the Pittsburgh Steelers. He's 5'11", like 231. Don't talk to me about size anymore, okay? Don't do it. I don't want to hear about that. If a guy can play, a guy can play. And in today's NFL, the undersized safety is no longer the undersized safety. Linebacker. He's just a linebacker now. Like, we can stop with the undersized linebacker because everyone's looking for the 230-pound linebacker. All right, it's cool to have the 240 guy that can do the same thing the 230 guy does, but there aren't a bunch of 240, 245 guys that can do what the 230-pound guys do. So everyone's looking for the 230-pound guy because he has a elite set of skills that is necessary for survival in today's NFL. So miss me with the undersized linebacker talk. In any event, he wasn't able to really work out prior to the draft. That's what I think. If he goes out and does what Bush and the 2 Devins did, for that matter, let's just call it the 2 Devins, Devin White, Devin Bush, what they were able to do, which is run a sub 4.5 And really, those guys were closer to sub 4 threes, or excuse me, sub 4 fours. They were damn near, they were in the high 4 fours. So if he would have had a chance to run, and I think he would have run somewhere in that 4.51, 4.47 range, he would have probably been a 4th or 5th round pick, maybe even a 3rd round pick. The guy's got talent, man. All right, so I think you stole right here, is what I think you did. All right. In an NFL where undersized backers are the norm and almost a necessity against these rapidly evolving NFL offenses, meet David Long, a perfect example of the undersized linebacker that's growing in number in the league. Long's explosiveness and aggressiveness pops off the screen. His willingness to take chances are a gift and a curse. If he guesses right, it's a tackle for loss, it's a sack, it's a blown up play, or even a takeaway. If he guesses wrong, it's a potential explosive play that could be on the menu, and I did see that happen once or twice watching him on tape. Nonetheless, as a wise man once said, I'd rather tame a maniac than try to revive a corpse. Long's aggressive demeanor will make him an NFL contributor sooner rather than later. I'm telling you right now, I watched this guy blitz. And like I talked about with DeAndre Walker, if there's a game that you need to watch if you want to really get the essence of what this guy brings to the table, there's the TCU game. He was all over the football field. But I challenge you to go watch him against Oklahoma as well. We know they're dynamic, they're explosive, they do a lot of good things. Watch him in that game. He doesn't make any major plays, but it was just his ability to just be a nuisance, to be explosive, to beat blockers to the spot, to disengage and get involved in the play. He did a lot of that in the Oklahoma game. Those were the 2 games that stuck out for me watching David Long, among others. This is a guy that I just think he has so much potential. His ability to blitz, his ability to beat offensive linemen to the spot, because he's so over aggressive, and he has this anticipatory nature element to his game where he sees it and he doesn't hesitate. A lot of guys, they need to see it actually happening before they react. He's a guy that once he thinks it's happening, he's gone. Now again, that can bite you in the ass, but it also, scared money don't make money in this league. All right, you can't be afraid. There's a reason why Luke Kuechly is in the backfield and he's an all-pro, because he's not waiting to see if that play's developing. He's going now. All right, not now, like right now. That's why he's in the backfield. All right, the greats don't wait. They go and make a play. They don't wait for you to take the fight to them. They're taking the fight to you, and that's what David Long does. I really like this guy, and it is rare that I give these out in the 6th or the 7th round. You may have the occasional 5th rounder, but it's rare. I mean, it's extremely rare that I give these out in the 6th, in the 7th round, but this guy deserves it. He's going to be a player for you. I'm telling you right now, and you can thank me later for having this intel, because I'm telling you, David Long's going to be a stud for you down the road. In the 6th round, 188th pick overall, linebacker out of West Virginia, David Long, for me, is I really feel good about him. I really do. And the reason he wasn't able to work out pre-draft is he had an ankle injury that he sustained at the Senior Bowl. And so that leaked into the combine. It leaked over into pro days, and he wasn't able to work out. So you weren't able to put time to what you saw on tape. But you know what you saw. You know you saw an explosive, dynamic guy that can cover ground and can be a playmaker. And there's a lot of good here with David Long, man. The dude was ultra productive. He was the Big 12 Player of the Year. Like you know what you're getting here. The Big 12 Defensive Player of the Year. Like, the dude is a stud. Like, you know that this guy can be productive. It's just to what extent at the next level. That's the only question. I comped him to Jatavis Brown, the undersized linebacker that was drafted by the Los Angeles Chargers a few years back out of Toledo. I remember when I watched tape on him, I was so blown away by his ability. He's come in. He's been a really good player for the Chargers, and I think that the same thing is going to happen with David Long in Tennessee. It's only a matter of time before he cracks your lineup and you can't get him out of the game, because he's a 3-down linebacker. He's a guy that can impact the game in a number of different ways. And I think it's only a matter of time before the Titans figure that out and have this guy on the field if he's able to stay relatively healthy. So, as you can see, the Titans pretty much met all of their needs in this draft. The only one they didn't hit was tight end. And I really think you just simply ran out of picks. There isn't one pick that I look at and say, this is where you should have taken a tight end. Obviously, the Nate Davis pick could have been a great sweet spot to take a tight end in this particular draft. You could have walked away with an elite tight end in the third round because it was such a deep class. But you needed offensive line help. And if you would have waited any later than the third round, you probably would have been getting a guy that isn't plug and play worthy. Whereas with Nate Davis, you feel good about him coming in and being potentially a plug-and-play guy. Your offensive coordinator has already said, look, we want to run the football, and we want to be powerful. We want to exert our will, and we want to move guys off the line of scrimmage with our run game. We have Derrick Henry, one of the most big and imposing and powerful backs in the league. We want to mirror that with our offensive line, and a guy like Nate Davis does that for you. So I don't have a problem with Nate Davis in the third round, and I think you just simply, you moved up in each of the final 3 picks that you had, 4th, 5th, and 6th, Amani Hooker, DeAndre Walker, and David Long. You moved up for every single one of those players. So in essence, it took away the ability to have, that extra pick. And I don't have a problem with that because every single one of these players that you got, I believe in. So if Delanie Walker's healthy, you can get away with Delanie Walker and Jonnu Smith at tight end. You'll be fine. And you got a plethora of backups that you are cool with, but eventually you're going to have to address the tight end position. I love this draft. I thought it was a really good draft by John Robinson and company, man, and I'm excited about the back end of your draft, Hooker and Walker and Long and what those guys can be. I'm equally as excited about seeing what Jeffrey Simmons and A.J. Brown will be when they get on the football field. This is a fun draft. Let's take a look at the score that the Titans were able to compile. So a nice, concise 6-player draft. I thought they did a magnificent job of navigating the draft, knocking down needs, and also getting talented football players that kind of meet the needs that they had going into the draft. Now it's all about these guys panning out on the football field, and we'll see what happens for the Titans. But this is a Titans team that I think they're being slept on, and I'm really anxious because if Marcus Mariota can put it together, stay healthy. That's number one with him. He's got to stay healthy. At some point, 16 games has to be on the menu for him. It hasn't been throughout his career. It needs to be. And if he can find a way to stay healthy and the running game comes along and then these receivers all pan out and the defense takes that next step, because I think that's the next thing that can get you over. Even if the offense continues to be middle of the pack to the lower half of the league, if the defense takes that next step, if you get that edge presence, if you get some pressure on the interior, then all of a sudden it changes the dynamics of your defense. You go from, 15th defense in the league, 13th maybe at best, to now a top 10 defense. And if you can do that, it'll make up for some of the deficiencies of your offense. So I'm anxious to see what the Titans do moving forward. This is a big draft for them. So really, that's it for your man, Louie Tee. Remember, if it's not your man T, it's not the best NFL coverage it could be. Check out the Louie Tee Network podcast. I already told you, available on every platform you could imagine. Go ahead and make sure you check that out. Subscribe and rate and review the Louie Tee Network podcast. Also, make sure you subscribe to the Louie Tee Network here on YouTube. I thank you for joining me. Plenty more where this came from. If you're a Titans fan or a fan of any of the teams in the National Football League, your man Louie Tee has you covered. Until next time, I'm your man Louie Tee signing off. Have a good one. Louie Tee.